The Timeshift.
Hello dear listener, it is me Chris Hall, and this week I'm recording my review only about an hour or two after the episode itself actually aired. It's about 9:15 where I am, and I honestly don't think my opinion on this episode is going to change all that much between now and when I would have recorded the episode tomorrow, so we're just going to do the review here and now because I have a few minutes free and I just really want to get my thoughts about this week's episode just off my chest. If you have any thoughts about this week's episode, leave them in the comment section down below. Whilst you're down there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is increasing the scary place of small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good. Now on to the review itself, and I think that we can just right here and now eliminate any kind of pretense regarding this week's episode and just say it how it is. And I have to say that I feel that this week's episode is the least of this season thus far. I don't think it is terrible by any means or stretch of the imagination. I just don't think it's anywhere near as good as what we've had thus far. It's certainly not as good as what we had last week, and it definitely isn't anywhere near as good as the first episode of this year's season. And it just leaves me sitting here right now in the dark, just pleading to God that this is just the one bad episode of this season, and it's just onwards and upwards from here. But here and now I'm not that optimistic, because going off previous records, it's about this point in the season where the wheels just fall off the trolley and it's all almost downhill from here. But if we are to cover the headline positives of this week's episode before we get into some of my deeper thoughts, I have to say that I do commend the effort of this story more than I think I'd commend its execution. I mean, all fair play to them for wanting to tell a story that is largely non-linear. I feel that Doctor Who plays it far too safe as far as its structure is concerned, particularly bearing in mind that this is a show about time travel. We never get any moments within the programme where it's like Back to the Future 2, where we have people trying to avoid their past selves, and we're not seeing things from different angles. It's all very linear, and this week we get something that's far more non-linear, but maybe not in the way I think that it could have been done. And again, I really don't think it worked all that well, but we'll get onto that in a little bit more time shortly. I feel that there are many fine scenes in this week's episode, some really great moments with some decent acting, directing and pacing, and some really neat character and costume design. I really do enjoy the fact that Whittaker is once again getting time to actually be the Doctor, and I really do love the harsher edge that she gets on the character towards the end of this episode, and it's something I really wish we saw more of her throughout our time as being the Doctor, but you know, we just got to take the positives where they are and when they come up. And I have to say that I do appreciate that time has been spent to develop these story threads here and now, rather than do what previous seasons of Doctor Who has done, where they'd almost tried to cram everything in the final two episodes. We saw it in the Russell T Davies era, we saw it in the Stephen Moffat era, you know, where nothing would really happen for the majority of the season. Then the final two episodes was when everything was happening, and there was never this feeling there was enough time to really develop anything, and it all just kind of felt cramped and congested. This week we don't get that, and we haven't really had that thus far in this season, but this is an episode which is... Look, I'm just going to say, on balance, I didn't like this episode quite as much as I really think I should have done, or really as much as I really think that I would have done had other creative choices been made. I really don't think that this is a time to start ringing alarm bells and start to panic about what's going to be happening, but I am concerned as to whether or not now Chris Chibnall can stick the landing here. I am worried that this is all just going to end in a bit of a mess, and I'm particularly worried as to what we're going to find out about the Doctor by the time we get to the end of this. I worry that we are going to find out who the Doctor is, but we'll discuss my theory on that in just a short while's time. This is an episode which is almost entirely revolving around setup and exposition, with a few fleeting moments of a more immediate storytelling. As such, there's not really much of a core story that I can really talk about. Oh sure, the stuff with the Doctor trying to save her friends and the sheer desperation on show when she's trying to do it is fantastic, and I really wish that had been the meat of the episode end to end without these other forays and tangents that we went down. I liked the character building moments, and I liked the fact that we're building the backstory, and that stuff is fine in and of itself, but it's not something you can hang the entire episode around. And that's my overall feelings about the episode itself. It really just doesn't hang well together. with the story itself feeling largely incidental. As I've said previously, I think there are some really great scenes in this week's episode, some really great performances, some great character moments, some really solid writing and great directing, but they're largely isolated. Structurally, this week's episode feels like we're watching the drama equivalent of a sketch show comedy. You know, just having these moments where we're just dropping on our characters, they say their catchphrase, they disappear for a bit, they come back, they say their catchphrase, and they disappear a bit. It's like watching the dramatic equivalent of a Harry Enfield sketch show comedy. But in those moments, it doesn't really matter what's happening with these characters and where they are, because there is no wider narrative, or even a narrative in those episodes. Here there is. And as a whole entity, it just, again, doesn't hang well together because there isn't much of a through line of much of a plot here. This is a story which feels like it's setting us up for more about the timeless child. And I have a bad feeling that we're going to learn that Vinda and Belle are the Doctor's parents. When I saw Belle appearing in the episode, she had that jacket on her with the little blue symbol on the back of it, and I wondered if that was supposed to be some kind of visual clue that she had something to do with the Doctor. Maybe I thought that, oh, she might be River Song, or she might be the Doctor's granddaughter, you know, someone that was connected to the Doctor. But towards the end of the episode, we learn that she isn't. We learn that she is Vinda's other half, his wife, or his girlfriend, or his partner, or whatever. And I thought that was a neat little thing, a neat little twist, and interesting to see where the two of them actually meet up. And I do worry that this is going to be a power of love saving the day kind of a deal, but I am more worried about the fact we're going to learn that they are the Doctor's parents, and that Belle is currently carrying the Doctor, and at some point in the final embers of this storyline, the baby's going to fall through a time-space hole and appear on Gallifrey, and then there we go, we find out who the Doctor is. And I really don't like the prospect of that. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that isn't the case. I am honestly kind of hoping that we're going to see the equivalent of a time-space retcon to just kind of get rid of the timeless child stuff full whack, but I'm just here worried that that's going to be the case. That we have just met the Doctor's parents, because how they're set up as characters just feels like, alright, let's chop the Doctor in half as far as who they are as a person, and just try and suggest that what makes them who they are is genetic. Their sense of adventure and their sense of right and wrong is something that they inherited from their parents, rather than something that they developed by just being in the environments that they grew up in, if you get what I'm meaning. They're trying to suggest that they're a good person by way of birth, not by way of them growing and developing as a person, and I don't like that. I am worried that this is a storyline which is going to end up with us discovering, again, who the Doctor is. And I really do not like that, and I hope that's not the case. I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope that I'm wrong. As far as the episode itself and what little we get as far as a core story is concerned, I am just really dumbfounded by the fact our villains just kind of left. It was almost like a I'll get you next time, Inspector Gadget kind of a thing. Where they just kind of, alright, we've been foiled, Team Rocket's blasting off again, and there they go. You know, I'm just there thinking of, hang on a minute, aren't these Adola Link women supposed to be some kind of important element of your plan? And you're just kind of wandering off now? We have all these kind of creepy abilities where you can effectively erase people from existence, and you're just kind of disappearing now? I mean, sure, maybe we'll figure out where all this lies further down the line, but for here and now, it just doesn't say much. So much of this episode just doesn't say much. Again, it's a lot of setup, a lot of exposition, a lot of developing storylines that won't be resolved for quite a long time yet. And that's the big issue with all of this. We don't really know when these questions are going to be answered. We hope that they're going to get answered by the end of this season, but there's no guarantee of that. We might not get our answers for a good year or so at this point, given that the fact that this entire storyline is going to be 6 episodes long and then dragged out for about 2 or 3 extra specials that are going to be taking place over the course of next year. So when eventually we get around to all this, maybe then it'll be worth it. But for here and now, we just kind of get an episode which is just setting up characters who may or may not be big, important, canon-breaking things, or are just kind of neat for the here and now. And maybe by the time this all wraps up, we'll look back at this episode as being a key part of that. Sure, maybe a little bit boring, but important as far as character and story setup is, but even still, it's just kind of there. Look, I don't want to end this review on a bum note, but I have to be honest, I'm not quite as optimistic as I was last week as far as the direction of this season and this storyline. I can't help but think that this storyline is starting to bite off more than it can chew at the moment. This was an episode which was a hell of a lot of moving furniture to get everything in place for future episodes and for when eventually this is all wrapped up. I do sincerely hope that this is all worth it in the end. And again, I do appreciate the fact they aren't just trying to cram all this information into the final 2 episodes of the season, as we got in the Moffat and the Russell T Davies era. But at the same time, I am worried again that this isn't going to last. This isn't going to work. Because whilst I am happy that this stuff has time to breathe, I can't help but feel that it didn't have time to actually just be a story, to have a clear beginning, middle and end. So what we end up getting here isn't an episode where you can just randomly switch it on one day when it's on UK Gold or something and just sit back and relax and enjoy it, because its enjoyment is going to be wholly contingent on whether or not Chibnall is able to stick the landing in the end. And again, I'm not 100% certain that he can. I hope that I'm wrong, because we're now halfway through this year's season. Whilst things could improve, and with next week's episode looking promising, there is a part of me that's worried that we're going to get to the end of this season or the end of this storyline, and the final act isn't going to be worth it. I know that there are some people who love The Timeless Child and all the stuff that's connected to it, on all the doors that it opens up for so many people, and I do respect that and I do appreciate that. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that, as bold and as ambitious as that is, it's not getting the basic ones and zeros of storytelling right. Like, I can be sold on the idea that Vinda and Belle are the Doctor's parents, but it needs to be told to me in a way that feels it works structurally, that it feels it works as a story. And yeah, I am not going to be happy at the fact that a character whose whole thing is them being a mystery, them just being a name without a surname or a forename or anything like that. They're just a concept, they're this entity that does good, and I dislike the idea that maybe by the end of this we're going to know who their mummy and daddy are. But if it's told to me in a way that I can link with emotionally, that I can understand, oh sure, I'll put my hands up and say it's genius if it's good enough. But I worry that it won't be, and that's the issue. I hope that I'm wrong. Again, I hope that I'm wrong, but I feel that this is an episode which itself is all set up, no immediate payoffs, even as far as the core story itself is concerned. It just feels like a bit, a segue scene, the bit between 2 episodes. If this is, I don't know what analogies to compare it to or make of it, but it is what it is. It's connecting tissue between 2 larger elements of the story, and I hope that again, in the end, it's going to be worth it. But I worry that it might not be. But what about you, dear listener? What do you think about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves or towards the end of next week's video. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, do all that kind of YouTubey stuff. I personally, I don't know what to say. I've said enough about this week's episode, and it is getting late. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!